So Nikki, it looks like we finally got a $100 billion deal coming down the pipe, with Vodafone confirming this morning that it is in talks with Verizon about disposing its 45% stake in Verizon Wireless. This is a deal that's been talked about for years. Why do you think that Vodafone is finally confirming now that this is happening? What's pushed the events to the fore?
Yeah, I get the feeling this is more serious this time. I think there's probably two things. Firstly, the US market is changing, and the wireless sector, which has been very lucrative by telco standards, is likely to become more competitive. That's partly because of the Sprint deal, partly because of changing dynamics there. So I'm sure Vodafone would like to be able to say that it's got out at the top. Secondly, assuming Vodafone gets out of Verizon Wireless, it will be left with predominantly a large European business and then some emerging market assets, which are quite sizable but smaller. And Europe itself is changing. It's been a moribund market for several years, but recession is, as we all know, officially over. And convergence, this idea that people want just not mobile services, but services over tablets, pay TV, etc., is picking up pace quite fast in some countries. And there is a feeling that the regulatory situation, which has been very difficult, there's been a reluctance to allow much consolidation, may be easing up a bit. So if Europe is beginning to look a little more promising and the US a little less so, Vodafone's attitude may be changing. But I do feel that Vodafone is still going to want a very good price, and 130 billion for the stake is an awful lot of dollars, is an awful lot of money.
There is a big gap, as you mentioned. Verizon is rumoured to want $100 billion, to pay $100 billion for the stake, whereas Vodafone supposedly wants more like $130 billion. And that's a big gap to match at a time when Verizon's stock is falling because of consolidation and pressure in the sector. Rates are also rising in the bond market, and this deal will involve really big capital raising efforts. So call it $100 billion. Half of that will have to be in stock, and half from Verizon, and half of it will have to be in debt. So for Lal McAdam, the CEO of Verizon, he is going to have to take on a major risk of raising record amounts of debt, buying out Verizon Wireless potentially at the top of the market, all while rates are rising. For Vodafone, it leaves them in this precarious position of being left with Europe, which so far had been fairly poorly performing, but this turn of events, turn of fortunes in Europe, is making some people think maybe this is going to be the right time for them to buy assets.
And we've got this question of tax, haven't we, as well? The potential capital gains tax bill could be quite sizable.
Originally, it had been rumoured of being something like $40 billion, and that had always been a stumbling block for talks to ever take place. But earlier this year, Verizon went on record saying they didn't think tax was an issue, and that there was a structure whereby you could get around that capital gains tax, mainly through doing the transaction in the US, and bring the tax bill down to something like $5 billion. But analysts are saying maybe if there is a deal done, Vodafone might have to keep a pot of, say, like $25 billion aside just in case there is a tax dispute. But for me, the tax is less of an issue and more a question of valuation and whether or not either of these CEOs are willing to take a bet on the market, really. The other question that it raises is what happens to the rest of Vodafone? Could AT&T come along and buy it? AT&T has been quite vocal about wanting to buy assets in Europe, and I think UK and Germany are attractive markets for it. What do you think the chances are of that happening, say, after a deal with Verizon struck?
Oh gosh, I think that speculation will almost certainly help support the Vodafone price, assuming a deal goes through. The rump of Vodafone doesn't, on today's valuations, look that expensive. So the AT&T speculation, I suspect, will hold it up anyway. In the meantime, though, I think the management of Vodafone are going to have to work very hard to try and maximise their position in Europe and try and negotiate their way through this very difficult sort of combination of the industry drive for convergence and consolidation and the regulatory obstacles.
Well, it looks like there still could be quite a lot of risk, even though potentially this deal could come in days. Maybe let's not hold our breath. Thanks very much.